What's going on? This is Chrono Link 9. I'm here for a review, finally. Most of my videos on my channel have been just like unboxings and stuff, but I'm actually here to bring you a review. Then this is of a classic game, or kind of classic game. It's over 10 years old, so I guess that sort of counts as a classic game. It's PlayStation era, and that game is Chrono Cross. I just finished this game earlier today. I was doing a Gents Challenge as part of the Pete's Game Room forum, and I actually failed because we were given a 2-month span of time, and we're supposed to finish by the end of December. And obviously it's January now, and I hadn't finished the game in the time span. I just finished it today. I think today's the 6th. So yeah, I just sort of want to talk about the game, my general thoughts about it. I'm a really big fan of the original Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo. I never had it on the Super Nintendo, but I did play it later and through emulation and the remake or the port on the DS, which is actually an excellent port. Actually has some interesting tie-ins with Chrono Cross, that I've read up on and sort of experienced as I played through that game. So just about Chrono Cross general things. It is a semi-sequel to Chrono Trigger. A semi-sequel is in, there's actually a lot of interesting, I guess maybe I should just go back a little bit. Chrono Cross, when I first heard that it was released, I only heard that it was like sort of loosely tied with Chrono Trigger, having at one point very little knowledge about even Chrono Trigger. I heard about Chrono Cross, its sequel. I later came to find out that the fan base, people who really like Chrono Trigger, that it was kind of divided. With people were like, well, there's not enough Chrono Trigger stuff in it. It's really not based very much on Chrono Trigger at all. It's kind of like a whole new story that only has some elements of Chrono Trigger stuff in it. They completely changed the battle system around. There's totally new characters, and it's almost a completely new setting altogether as well. So some people were really kind of resistant about that. So going into the game, that was kind of my initial idea, was just that I was going to get an experience that kind of had something to do with Chrono Trigger, and that it was going to be, fairly good, and but that the Chrono Trigger stuff would be, very few and far between. I was a little surprised when I was actually playing the game, because I was seeing Chrono Trigger influences and things all over the place. It wasn't like super involved in the plot. It was just kind of like, here's like a little thing that, like a little reference to Chrono Trigger, and various characters and stuff came in. Luca from Chrono Trigger actually has a lot to do with the plot in this game, as do a couple of the other Chrono Trigger characters. Some of the more minor characters, and well, their major NPCs in Chrono Trigger have some roles that are sort of played behind the scenes, or given through story stuff in Chrono Cross, the story. But yeah, the story of Chrono Cross is it's interesting. I'll give it that. I did like it a lot. I thought the story was very good, there were some complaints. There were some issues I had with it a little bit. One is, I think that when they had the idea at Squaresoft, when they were making this game, we only had it's 6 characters or something in the last one, 6 playable characters in the last one, or 8. I don't even remember anymore. I'm trying to think. So you had Chrono, Marl, Frog, Isla, Luca, Robo. Magus. That's 7. So you only had like 7 playable characters. 7 playable characters in the first game. But in this one there's like at least 30. I know there's got to be more than that. The problem with that is that with the inclusion of so many different characters, you sort of have to sacrifice some plot. Some of these characters are not going to be really serving the plot very well. So you'll have characters that you might enjoy this character, like, ooh, this character, they have this ability or something that I really like, or their innate element is something that I kind of want to work with, and so on. Then that's sort of a gameplay thing I'll get into in a little bit. But the problem is that if sometimes having them in your party, and actually even with some more major characters in your party, sometimes they really just don't influence, or they don't say anything about what's going on very much. You know, the plot will sort of, events will sort of happen, and they'll just kind of say, like, remark on it, because they're such, you know, they're such kind of minor characters. There's, you know, there's like no way for them to interact with sort of what's going on in kind of a deep, meaningful way. So the problem with having so many characters is just you can't really get, you know, super in depth with any particular one of them, except for like Kid, who is a very important character in the story, and of course Surge, and this is another mistake I think that the plot made, is that, like Chrono Trigger, the main character of this game, Surge, is silent protagonist. The problem with that is that in Chrono Trigger, Chrono is more of a actor. You know, he, like, not an actor, but like he's a man of action. You know, he goes after stuff, and he's you know, he's working through his actions. The problem with this is that Surge in Chrono Cross is actually incredibly important to the storyline. His actions and thoughts are kind of important, and a lot of the stuff that happens around him directly, like, involves the plot, and having your protagonist, who's so important in the plot, be completely silent is really, really hard for it to you know, to tell a story or get any kind of emotion across. I think that they worked well within that restraint. You know, I think they did a decent job, given that they were like, okay, we're gonna make him silent. They did a good job through that, you know, making the plot work around that. But I think overall, I think they could have been serviced much better had Surge been able to talk. And so that's certainly, those are a couple weaknesses I had with the story. Overall, the story, it's actually kind of, it doesn't. I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. It is not as, there's not something super important on the agenda going on all the time, I guess I should say. I don't really know if that's even the right way to say that, but there's a lot of times where you'll have a specific goal, like, okay, we need to get to this point, but there's going to be a lot of traveling around in order to get there. So it feels a little, it's not necessarily that it's fluff, because a lot of the stuff that happens, you know, while you're trying to get to this location is kind of important. But at the same time, it did feel a little padded in some areas. There was one side quest sort of nearing the end of the game, where you have to go to each of these islands to get these jewels from the dragon gods, and so you have to do like a little mini dungeon, then you have to fight the dragon. It wasn't necessarily that was padded, because I actually really liked that part, because it was cool, because you get to actually go to all these different islands in both the dimensions and stuff. And I think it was okay, but there were certainly some times where I think it lost focus a little bit. The plot lost a little focus. Where it was really started to get strong was actually, interestingly enough, I felt the strongest plot stuff happened towards the middle and the very end of the game. There's a point in the middle that I will not spoil for those of you who have not played this game, that I didn't see coming out of anywhere. I'd somehow not spoiled it for myself. I apparently have been doing that pretty well with games. I played BioShock last year, and I somehow hadn't gotten the big sort of reveal on that spoiled either. But in this one, there's a big thing that happens, and I didn't see it coming. Those of you who've played the game know exactly what I'm talking about. I didn't see it coming anywhere, and it's a pretty significant thing that happens right around the middle of the game, and it was a really interesting thing that happened. Like, I was like, didn't see it coming. So, you know, I really got to give it kudos to them there, because they kept that pretty well hidden. And towards the end of the game, there's a lot of plot dump at the very end of the game. You know, a lot of stuff, things that questions that you'd had, like, oh, like, what does this all mean? Like, pretty much all of it gets solved, like, right at the end, kind of like really close together. and it's kind of confusing. I'm fine with that because I really like JRPGs and I really like all the convoluted, confusing stuff. And this is sort of a time travel plot as well as a dimensional plot. There's one part of time travel that's not super involved. But then there's a lot of like interdimensional travel where you're traveling between the one world and its split sort of timeline. So there's a lot of that. It gets a little confusing near the end, but I actually really like that kind of thing. So trying to figure out like, okay, clicking all the gears together and all the pieces, like this is what this character's motivation was. Okay, understanding everything. Who's double crossing who and stuff. There's a lot of that in this game actually, that you find out near the end. And it's great, and it's a spectacular ending. It's a pretty open-ended ending, but the credits song alone kind of seals the deal for me. The credits song is just absolutely beautiful. And there's another point I want to get to. The music in this game is magnificent. It's some of the best video game music you'll ever come across. It's Chrono Cross. Okay, I'm sorry, that was really lame. Much like Chrono Trigger before it, the music is just spectacular. Yasunori Mitsuda, man, he is the bomb. Like, whatever game he composes, you need to get the soundtrack to that game. He's just great. I know Nobuo Uematsu kind of helped out with Chrono Trigger, but Chrono Cross, man, that was all Yasunori Mitsuda, and it was great. He did a really good job with it. Fantastic game. I guess going on to fantastic music, I want to get, a little bit on the gameplay. One thing I actually really liked is stuff in the gameplay and the battle system actually comes into play in the story, which you don't normally see in an RPG, where things like the magic system, the elements, that actually has some bearing on the story, believe it or not. Like, it's really interesting because, like, there was one sort of plot point I didn't see coming. Just some standard things like that sort of come into play in the plot, which is really interesting. But I actually had a hard time, for whatever reason, trying to get used to the battle system. It sort of, from what I've heard, it's similar to the Final Fantasy VIII system. There's like the junction system in Final Fantasy VIII, which is a game I have yet to play, and that'll be soon. But the system in this is where you sort of have this grid that after you defeat bosses, there's spots on the grid. It increases essentially. So you can place elements and stuff on it, and elements are the magic. There's like 6 different colors. There's red, yellow, green, blue, white, black, and some other color I'm forgetting. And so red. I don't know if I said red. Whatever. But anyways, yeah. So you sort of allot these different types of magic on your grid for each character, and so from that you can use it in battle. You can only use an element once in battle, which was something I was like, whoa, like I didn't really like that very much at first. And I couldn't just wrap my mind around using elements the right way. Like, I knew, weaknesses and stuff. There was something about it that I'm not really sure what it was, but there was just something about the system that I could not get used to at first, and so it took me a while, but I finally get used to it. I was kind of wanting it to be like Chrono Trigger's battle system because I really loved that one. It was sort of an active time battle system like they'd done in the Final Fantasy games of the same era, but it was more. There were like double text and triple text and stuff that you could learn with your characters battling together in battle. I think there's some of this in that game too, but I didn't come across any of it because I basically stuck to pretty much the same team after about like 15 hours in. I kind of had a team that I really liked, so I sort of went with them for most of the rest of the game. And so with that in mind, I can't really think. Is there much more for me to discuss? It's a fantastic game. Again, it's a bit confusing. The plot is a little up in the air in places. It's a little loses focus in a few spots, I think. But overall, I think it comes together as a pretty beautiful whole. The themes and stuff of the game are really, really nice, really, really good. It's a spectacular game, and you're really missing out if you haven't played it. I'm really glad I did. I really like all the connections to Chrono Trigger. As granted, as few and far between as they are, there are still some pretty big ones there that their effects, I guess you could say, of events that happen in Chrono Trigger really come into play in Chrono Cross. So it's a great game. I can't really say enough good stuff about it. It's not my favorite JRPG of all time, and it's probably not even anywhere close. But it's a very good game, and I really like some of the characters. I can't really like all of them, but I did really like Kid a lot. She was a great character, it's her whole arc throughout the game is really great. So, I highly recommend it. Can't say enough good things about it. I think you can get it cheap for the PlayStation, as far as I know. So yeah, with that, this is Chrono Link 9, and hope you enjoyed it. You can like and comment down below and all that jazz, and just making a 2-bit video, whatever. Hope you enjoyed it anyways. My rambling thoughts, my stream of consciousness review. I didn't write anything down before this, so I just sort of winged it. But yeah, hope you can make sense of it, and I'll see you next time. See ya.